Good evening and welcome. It is 6:00 p.m. on Wednesday, February 16, 2022, and I would like to call the regular meeting of the Holland City Council to order. Kathy, would you please call the roll?
Bird. Vreeman.
Here.
Peters.
Here.
Corbin.
Here.
Coronado.
Here.
Arnshorst.
Here.
Hoekstra.
Here.
Raymond.
Here.
Mayor Box.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Wonderful, thank you. We're going to begin this evening's meeting as we have for many years, first with an opening prayer this evening by Councilmember Coronado, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance, and we would ask that you would join us if you would like.
Father God, I just thank you for this time that we can come together in your honor, and we just pray that we will have ears to hear, an open mind, and an open heart. And we thank you for the work that you're doing here and amongst us, and with us and through us, and that the greatest of these is love and service. So thank you for this honor, and amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next on the agenda are our consent agenda items. These are items that are considered to be fairly routine and have been previously reviewed by members of council as part of our council packet, and they will be enacted in one motion unless a member of the audience or a member of council asks to have an item removed from the consent agenda and placed in its regular order on the regular agenda. But before we ask that question, Kathy, would you please review the consent agenda for us?
4A, absence excused, Councilmember Byrd. 4B, approval of meeting minutes. February 2, regular meeting. February 9, 2022, study session. 4C, oaths of office. 4D, Holland Board of Public Works, declaration of surplus material. 4E, city attorney. Ward reapportionment, proposed ordinance amendments, final adoption March 2, 2022. 4F, city clerk, 2022 Tulip Time fireworks request. 4G, purchasing, declare items as surplus. 4H, purchasing, approved lease agreement for 4 police sedans. 4I, finance department quarterly investment report. 4J, finance, West Michigan enforcement team, burn justice assistant grant approval, October 1, 2021 through September 30, 2022. 4K, public safety, 2021 Bureau of Justice Bulletproof Vest Partnership Grant Acceptance. 4L, Management and Administrative Services, Revocable License Agreement, Projecting Sign, 14 West 8th.
Great, thank you. Is there any member of the audience that would like to have an item removed from the consent agenda and placed on the regular agenda? Seeing none. Any member of council that would like to have an item removed from the consent agenda and placed on the regular agenda? Any amendments to the consent agenda that any member of council might want to make based on the fact that Mr. Byrd has joined us? Would we like to amend the consent agenda to take off the absences excused of Councilmember Byrd since he's joined us?
I don't know, should we vote?
Yes, you would like to do that? All right, is there a motion from council in regard to the consent agenda? I didn't realize it was going to be this difficult.
Yes, I move that we approve the consent agenda with the change that we make note that council person Byrd has arrived.
There's a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Second.
Support. I'll give that one to Mr. Vreeman. Kathy, would you please call the roll?
Byrd.
Yes.
Vreeman.
Yes.
Peters. Corbin.
Yes.
Coronado.
Yes.
Arnshorst.
Yes.
Hoekstra.
Yes.
Raymond.
Yes.
Mayor Box.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Great, thank you. Next is the public comment period under the Open Meetings Act of the State of Michigan. We provide members of the public the opportunity to communicate to council in all of our public meetings. During our regular meetings of council, we allow for 5 minutes. There are 3 lights on the dais in front of me. There's a green light, a yellow light, and a red light. Almost forgot the colors there for a moment. Green light, yellow light, red light. Green light means you're doing well on time. Yellow light means you have 1 minute left, and the red light means that your time has expired, and we are strict about that. This is an opportunity for you to communicate to us. We do not engage in discussion or answer questions at this point, but if there is a specific question, a staff member may be able to, or a council member may be able to answer that question for you at some point in the future. But having said that, is there anyone who would like to address council at this time? Yes, please come forward. And would you please state your name and your municipality for the record, please?
Judy Bisher, City of Holland resident. Do I need my address too?
Nope, that's currently in the rules, but we're unofficially not doing that until
Okay.
perhaps
All right,
later,
we're good.
so no need.
We're good. All right, I know you've all heard about this, has been floating around the community, but I'd like to at least formally present it. I have done this at the Board of Public Works Board meeting earlier this month. But I'd like to support putting a Tulip design on the anaerobic digester, which is going up. They're going to have to paint it anyway, so this would be an added bonus. I have some talking points I'd like to share. Water towers across the country have community designs and logos on them. See the iconic Peachoid in Gaffney, South Carolina, or the Corncob Water Tower in Rochester, Minnesota, as the most photographed examples. Holland, of course, is known for its tulips. The anaerobic digester is a perfect canvas for a big red Darwin tulip. Painted in BPW colors, as I said, red or yellow, I prefer red, with sky blue at the top, green stem bottom, perhaps with a design by local artist Carolyn Stitch, very, very local and very famous. And the Holland BPW logo on two sides facing north and south. See a rough sketch of the design. I have pictures attached to my talking points, which I'd like to share. A tulip design would be a great fit for what goes on in the digester, potential fertilizer for growing plants, tulips. For years, the BPW has tried to hide the waste reclamation process located in the downtown Holland, but everybody knows it's there. We need to embrace the biological miracle of the process that takes place at that facility. Think of it, your power goes out, you lose electricity. That goes out, I don't want to describe it. Public education about anaerobic digestion, which is a scary word, would be enhanced by drawing attention to a structure of a giant tulip, a little simpler, and then you can go from there. Think of it as the public gateway to the water reclamation process, as the visitor center is to the HEP power plant. I did do a little research on the internet, and I found two well-known and reviewed painting contractors, TMI Coatings out of St. Paul, Minnesota. They have experience with painting and doing wraps on anaerobic digesters, so there you go. Southern Corrosion out of Roanoke, North Carolina, had painted and designed the Peachoid water tower, and I think they're doing it again to refresh it. Okay, the big thing in the room, of course, is the extra cost for design. We know we have to paint the digester for maintenance purposes and keep corrosion from happening. But the extra cost for a design, maybe a fundraiser among the community could defray the extra cost, similar to what's been done for bricks at the library or repairs on the Park Theater. Tulip Time, City of Holland, City Sustainability Committee, one of those groups could be involved in helping set that up. I'm more than willing to help out in whatever capacity I can to make it happen. As a former HBPW employee who kept hoping for getting goats at the landfill, and I never got them, perhaps this project would be more acceptable, so I hope you will all give it serious consideration. And I'd like to turn the pictures in with.
You just leave those with the city clerk if you'd like.
Okay. Oh, I do have one fun picture to share. Young mothers-to-be like to show off their baby bumps on social media. How much more fun would this picture be if there was a giant tulip there instead of a big red iron ugly thing? Just saying. Just saying. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to address council at this time? And would you please state your name and your municipality for us, please?
Okay. Ann Henriksen from Zeeland, and I would like to continue with, in presenting the second part of the tribute to Dr. Martin Luther King in honor of Black History Month. His original intent was that there is a way for people to recognize injustice and to proceed in changing it by the power of God's ways and directions. Dr. King did not hide behind the model of separation of church and state. Dr. King boldly and proudly used God's word and its power to shed light on injustice. He offered the sermon, Love Your Enemies, delivered at Dexter Avenue Baptist Church, Montgomery, Alabama, 1957. Let me review Dr. King's opening words. So I want to turn my attention to this subject, love your enemies. It's so basic to me because it's part of my philosophical and theological orientation, the whole idea of love, the philosophy of love. In the 5th chapter of the Gospel as recorded in St. Matthew, we read these very arresting words flowing from the lips of our Lord and Master. Ye have heard that it has been said, Thou shalt love thy neighbor and hate thy enemy. But I say unto you, love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, and pray for them that despitefully use you, that ye may be the children of the Father, of your Father which is in heaven. Now there's a final reason I think Jesus says, love your enemies. It is that love has within a redemptive power. And there is a power that eventually transforms and converts individuals. That is why Jesus says, love your enemies. Because if you hate your enemies, you have no way to allow the redeeming effect that love has on your enemies. Here's the person who is a neighbor, and this neighbor is doing something wrong to you. Just keep being friendly to that person. Don't do anything to embarrass them. Oh, that they may react with bitterness because you are like that. They react with guilt feelings, and sometimes they hate you a little more at the transition period. But just keep on loving them as God does. And by the power of your love, they will break down under the load. It's redemptive. There is something about love that it builds up and is creative. There is something about hate that tears down and is destructive. I think about one of the best examples of this. We all remember the great president of the United States, Abraham Lincoln. You remember when Abraham Lincoln was running for president of the United States. There was a man who ran around the country talking about Lincoln. He said a lot of bad things about Lincoln, a lot of unkind things. And sometimes he would get to the point that he would even talk about his looks, saying, you don't want a tall, lanky, ignorant man like this as a president of the United States. Finally, Abraham Lincoln was elected president of the United States, and it was at the point of choosing his cabinet. He had to select a Secretary of War. He looked across the nation and decided to choose a man named Stanton. And when Abraham Lincoln told his advisors this fact, they said to him, Mr. President, are you a fool? Do you know that Mr. Stanton has been saying about you? He has written derogatory statements that he made about you. Abraham Lincoln stood up and told his advisors, yes, I know it. I read about it. I heard him myself. And after looking over the country, I find that he is the best man for the job. Mr. Stanton did become the Secretary of War, and a few months later, Abraham Lincoln was assassinated. If you go to Washington, D.C., you will discover that one of the greatest statements ever made about Abraham Lincoln was made by this man, Stanton. He began his eulogy with, he now belongs to the ages, continuing with stories of his experiences with the president, describing his excellent character and integrity. Mr. Stanton would have gone to his grave hating Mr. Lincoln, and Mr. Lincoln gone to his grave hating Stanton. But through the power of love, Abraham Lincoln was able to see its redemption, his redemption of Mr. Stanton and himself. History, unfortunately, leaves some people oppressed and some people oppressors. There are 3 ways the oppressed can deal with their oppression. One is to rise up against their oppressors with violence and a corroding hatred. The danger in this is in its futility of endless chaos and its influence in generations to come. Another way is to acquiesce and give in, resigning yourself to oppression. This results in complaining and developing a sinister spirit of hatred for everything decent in the
Mr. Mayor, that's 5 minutes.
Thank you very much.
I will continue.
Is there anyone else who would like to
Little bit
address
more.
council at this time? Seeing none, I will close the public comment period. Next item on our agenda, item number 9, written petitions and communications. In addition to providing an opportunity for members of the public to speak to us directly at council meetings, we do also provide an email address for those that may not be able to come to a meeting, may be uncomfortable coming to a meeting. That email address is publiccomment@cityofholland.com. That's publiccomment@cityofholland.com. And we collect those in the interim between our regular meetings and then accept them as part of the record into our regular meetings. We don't read them out loud, but we do accept them into the record. And so what is the pleasure of council in regard to, I believe we have 2 different emails that we received over the last 2 weeks.
Motion that we accept those?
Moved by Coronado. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Hoekstra. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next item on the agenda, item 12A1, Board of Public Works, First Amendment to the Development Agreement with LG Energy Solutions, Michigan. Mr. Van Beek.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. Good to be with you tonight. As you'll see on the agenda, this and several items after it are under the section of Board of Public Works. So I'm going to be passing this on to Dave Koster here momentarily. The First Amendment to the Development Agreement, however, does deal with, I would say, primarily public works items, specifically the electric utility. But there were other items also involved with this development agreement that members of your city team and the BPW team, and really a lot of thanks to City Attorney Ron Vanderveen in pulling multiple aspects together. This development agreement is not uncommon in the sense of many times a very large development or project in the city has a lot of different moving parts to it, and a development agreement is a great legal way to make sure that all of that is captured in one location and outlines the responsibilities of both parties. You'll see that this is an amendment because there was an original development agreement back in 2010 when LG first came before us. The items in that development agreement were much more complicated and many more elements because we were dealing with annexations and setting up of property and all those things in the first place. But again, this amendment handles a variety of updated or new items. And with that, I'm going to have Dave come on up. He's already done this once at the BPW board meeting, so
Thank you.
round 2, Dave.
All right, great. Good evening, Mayor, members of City Council. It's nice to be with you. I appreciate the comments that Keith has made to date in giving you a little bit of background on the subject and the fact that we've had a development agreement since 2010, on the original phase 1, and that development agreement contemplated future phases, which is something I think we've all talked about, throughout the time frame that this project has been introduced and studied, is that was always kind of a plan and a thought that there would be future development. And of course, the city has a set of ordinances and the BPW has a set of terms and conditions, with regard to the services it provides. But it's always nice to be able to, on a project of this size, when the kind of commitments financially that are being made and the impact that it involves, are captured through an actual agreement, so there's no uncertainty with regard to the commitments that are being made and the obligations of all parties. And so that's what we've done here, is to really revisit the 2010 agreement and say, okay, what has changed, what's new, what really needs to be captured here in an amendment to recognize this new phase of development for LG Energy Solution Michigan. In addition to the people who Keith has already talked about, I also want to thank Greg King, who is in the room here from Lakeshore Advantage. Greg has been very instrumental at moving a lot of things forward in a very short period of time. Renaissance Zone obviously being one of those that was dealt with, and making sure that all of the parties and especially the people at LG understood the reasons why those things needed to happen and what needed to happen, what needed to be presented. quickly after that was done, attention was turned to the development agreement. I also want to thank the team at LG Energy Solutions Michigan as well for their quick study of this development agreement amendment and their attention to it and turnaround, because as you'll see following this particular item, there are a number of commitments that are being made on property acquisition and on the purchase of some very expensive pieces of equipment to serve the facility on the electric side. So as Keith mentioned, I'm just going to run through the elements of the development agreement here. It is, I would say, from a financial implication, probably one of the biggest things is in the BPW area, but it also talks about site planning and commitment to that. It talks about things like stormwater ordinances and adherence to those from a permit standpoint. It talks about the boundary restrictions associated with the fact that a new parcel is being created to make sure that a Renaissance zone can apply to this new phase. And with that, there are certain restrictions on the conveyance of property so that you can't just convey one parcel. They would both have to, go at the same time so that it doesn't create issues with setbacks and other provisions within the Unified Development Ordinance. Then you get into the utility issues, and there are a couple of things here. One is the water system. Interestingly enough, when the 2010 project was put in place, there was actually a water system that was built around the facility, and it remained the public water system, remained in the ownership of the Holland BPW. That is very unusual. When we normally serve a customer, we will have points of delineation, and then things that are on the property, more surrounding the property for service, will be private water system that's owned by the company. With the new development, there were going to be issues with the location of some of those public water system assets, and they would require moving them. When we move public water systems and reconstruct it, we have to actually go through a permitting process with the state of Michigan that can take some months in time frame. So this development agreement actually contemplates doing what is more of the normal process, where we would have points of delineation and isolation where the public water system would stop, and we would actually dedicate the assets that were built on their dollar back in 2010. So it was actually their funding, the developer's funding of it at that time, would be transitioned back to them, and we would have a bill of sale for those assets to go back to them. We would abandon the easements associated with those, and we'd have 3 points of disconnect there, one coming off from Waverly Court and two off from 48th Street. So that's contemplated within Section 5. And then in Section 6, it really deals with the size of the electric service to the plant, being that we're relying upon their application for service of a 71 megawatt service request. And in serving that, it requires a significant amount of infrastructure, about a $10 million estimated substation to be built. And with that, we want to make sure that there's a net revenues from this new service that's going to be able to fully meet the return on that investment for the utility. And so there's a certain time frame associated with that, 5 years of net revenues that have been identified here, and then a provision that if there is a shortfall there, that we can actually audit that and true that up, where there will be a contribution on the part of the company to make up that difference. There's a cap on the amount of the recovery, and part of that cap recognizes the fact that regardless of what happens there, if they are short, there still is an asset value to the BPW, and we can redeploy those assets for other use. And so it's not like we're totally stranded assets as well. So there's a little bit of give and take in the amendment associated with that. But we feel very confident with the level of service, if it is the 71 megawatts that we're anticipating, that we'll have no problem, being able to recover that in a timely basis. And then finally, there's some provisions in there for easements to make sure that as those properties and parcels are split, that we have the ability to run our services from an electric standpoint across those, but also out of that area. This was very important to have in place because, again, tonight you'll see some of the other commitments that are there from a financial standpoint. We really wanted to have this done by that time, and what you'll see in the packet is that we have something that has been through the city attorney's review. Ron gave it his blessing as being ready to go. The company has turned around and executed that as well, so you have a fully executed on their part document, which is really great news to be at this place. And I want to, again, thank Keith for his assistance and Greg on his assistance along with Ron in getting that done. So we'll be able to answer any questions you have.
Any questions from council members? Dave?
Yeah, just to clarify, Dave, going back to the water infrastructure that you were talking about that's on premises now. So if I'm understanding correctly, what will happen is that you'll create these several points of access like we would have with my house or something similar sort of thing.
Correct.
And then the rest of that infrastructure is abandoned to LG Chem, is that right?
That's correct. And matter of fact, I'm trying to see which exhibit it is here. It actually is Exhibit 4 in the Development Agreement Amendment. Shows that there already are 2 isolation valves on 48th Street, but we'll have to create a new one at the property line that is coming off from Waverly Court. There's actually an easement there that brings water to that point. So at the property line there, off from Waverly Court, will be a third one that we'll actually install. Then we'll create a bill of sale that will actually transfer those assets, and we'll abandon the easements that are associated with that. So that'll finalize, that transfer. And again, this is not an investment we made. The developer made it back in 2010, right. So it's not like we've made an investment and now all of a sudden we're losing that through that transfer. So that, hopefully that answers your question there.
Yeah, some of the responsibility is the companies for those.
Correct. Maintenance, going forward, the other thing that we really wouldn't like about this is that some of the easements that would be remaining, while they might still maintain a 20-foot easement, is still a very tight area inside of the factory perimeter to be able to actually get in and do repairs. So this is a much better situation, we believe, to have it dedicated over to them and have them actually have responsibility for it.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Yes, Quincy?
Yeah, you spoke about the cap recovery. Could you, I kind of was in and out for a second reading something else. Could you go over that one more time?
Yeah, so again, the way this works, it's not a cap on what the substation can cost, but it's a cap on the amount of recovery after 5 years when we look at the net revenues that are provided from the service to the facility. And then you look at what may be essentially not have been recovered to compensate for the substation. There's an ability to recover the difference on whatever the net revenues were versus the substation up to $7 million, okay? So it's very unlikely that the levels will be less than what we need to recover the full cost of the substation.
Okay.
But even if that recovery is $3 million over that 5 years, we still have the full 7 recovery up to the 10 that we can claim, okay? So it still is a very healthy provision for being able to recover. In addition to that, I think it's just also a recognition that if for some reason there would be a shortfall in terms of the amount of usage of that facility, those assets that were created for the substation now become available for us to make service to other customers and to otherwise improve the system. So it does have some value to us. It's not like it's a stranded asset where we go, well, that has no value to us anymore. And so we feel that this is a good provision to make sure that we get the recovery we need to protect our customers, but still recognize that there's a value that's there, if for some reason the worst situation that we can even imagine would happen where it's just that much short of what our expectations were. We really feel very comfortable that the amount of usage that's being anticipated will more than recover what the needs are for that substation over that 5-year period.
All right, so it's basically just an insurance policy.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Any other questions from council members? Yes, Lynn and then Belinda.
You said early in your presentation that LG had contemplated future phases, and I'm just wondering if this is the only phase or if there's another one.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, this is what we know at this point in terms of what that phase was. And if you go back to 2010, it's not like the nature of what this phase was specifically contemplated in 2010.
Okay.
I think the size that we see this at right now is probably more than what we had thought it might be in 2010 in terms of the amount of electric usage, for example. But there were always, you know, if you go back to the 2010 development agreement, there were references to phase 2 and phase 3 potentially associated with that. And so, you know, that is just, you know, what we understand based upon the conversations and the way the development agreement was constructed back in 2010. And that's why I'm referring to it, is just that what's coming to us now is really something that back in 2010 was contemplated.
So it must be hard to then make a decision on how to move forward with this phase if there's another one.
In a little bit, yeah. I mean, the substation that we're building has, I would say, a little bit of additional size and redundancy in it. We're building, we'll get to that under the next item, but there's 3 transformers that we're purchasing. That's not a usual configuration for our substations. Usually there's 2. But given the size of the service that's here and the configuration, in order to provide some redundancy in the case that one of those transformers would be out of service and we could still serve the entire site, that's what we're looking at doing and building for that reliability. Should we know something about a 3rd phase, then maybe you would build it a little bit bigger. But the other thing that actually we could do is the size of this type of facility kind of deserves to have a substation all of its own anyway. We have 9 other substations around our service territory. This facility has the potential of growing our electric needs on an annual basis by 40%. So to say, well, you know, maybe you would have had one substation if you had a 3rd phase already known that it could be bigger. It probably, the next phase, if there is a next phase, probably could deserve its own substation as well. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
Belinda?
I don't think, in the big picture, this is great for Michigan, and it's great for Holland, and great for the employees that it will employ. But I guess I'd be remiss if I'd say this, and again, you stressed that this was already planned in 2010. This is no surprises. But how do these changes or this growth, or this amendment affect the current residents? I think you touched a little bit about there is value to the other customers. And as you said, generally you have 2 transformers, and if one is out, then we'd have still, you know, the backup for service.
Yeah.
And then growing annually at 40%. So I guess I just wanted to touch base regarding how this amendment will affect the residents that live there currently.
Yeah, I don't think the development agreement really speaks to that. It speaks to ordinances, it speaks to planning commission reviews, it speaks to those things that I think you see them going through a process right now of working with our planning staff, and I'm sure Keith can speak more to that. Those are elements that are obligations that they've committed to within this, but they're also obligations that exist even if this amendment wasn't here. You know, to have those site reviews and to go through that process, that's all part of what's in the city code today. I will speak to the fact that there are benefits generally, and whether you're a Fillmore Township resident or you're a City of Holland resident or Holland Township or Park Township, our electric service territory is bigger than just the City of Holland. And so when you look at a new load coming in like this and the fact that the economy of scale that it creates helps defray fixed costs within the electric utility, that benefits all customers. You know, can I quantify for a particular resident what that means? No, but I can tell you that generally those type of improvements tend to make our system more efficient at its service, because we can take things that are fixed costs and we get more revenue that's supporting it generally. So that helps everybody to keep rates as low as they possibly could be. I think that's obviously a benefit. And then we talked about the fact, and just because maybe some haven't heard this, you know, there's a benefit that is accrued to the city as well. And I think, you know, there's a case to be made too that everybody around our region benefits from the amenities that are in the City of Holland. And if you think about the transfer payment that results from this increased usage, maybe possibly up to 1.7 million annually. You know, that goes to support a lot of functions that are services that are provided, yes, to city residents, but also those that enjoy the city when they come into the city and whether they lived in close proximity to the city. So there are other benefits that accrue from this development, both in the utility and also, you know, generally as it relates to the city.
Thank you so much.
Anyone else?
I just
Yes,
want
go
to
ahead, Nikki.
comment. I'm glad you mentioned that, because the more I read, and I attended the BPW board meeting also, and the board members asked many of the same questions we did, so, you know, we're matching them. But how complicated this is, and with the, you know, you had to send out requests to build some of the equipment in Virginia, and it's incredibly complicated, and I appreciate what you've done, but I guess I feel comfortable, even with the unknowns, how much the future will hold, how much, well, people are worried about traffic, they're worried about noise. There are all those unknowns that we are trying to plan for as a city, but I feel very comfortable, actually, because as a manager, you tend to dot your I's and cross your T's, and every time I think, this, you know, then you mention it offhandedly that you know, you've taken care of that. So you know, with the economy of scale and all this kind of stuff, I think overall it's a good thing for Holland.
Thanks.
So we'll just have to pick up, you know, where if you know, as things go on, like the neighbors and other things that, as time goes on, a lot of communication. So thanks for all your work and staff's work too.
Thank you.
Anyone else? What is the pleasure of council in regard to item 12A1, the First Amendment to the development agreement with LG Energy Solution, Michigan?
Move to approve First Amendment to the development agreement with LG Energy Solutions, Michigan.
It's moved by Byrd. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Coronado. Any discussion from council? Seeing none. Kathy, would you please call the roll?
Freeman. Freeman.
Yes, sorry.
Peters. Corbin. Coronado.
Yes.
Arnshorst.
Yes.
Hoekstra.
Yes.
Raymond.
Yes.
Byrd.
Yes.
Mayor Box.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Great, thank you. Item 12A2, East Point Substation Transformer Purchase. Mr. Van Beek.
Mr. Coster.
I wonder if you were going to jump into that one. So yes, following on to the development agreement, this is a very key piece and typically a very long lead time item, and something we wanted to get started on right away. So even before we had the development agreement in place as a staff, we started looking at creating a specification for the transformers and actually had already gone out for bids for that so that we could stay as timely as possible, and appreciate the work of our staff and Theka Engineering, who's been helping us on the specification development. We did solicit bids for transformers, and while many transformer suppliers are very, very busy, you know, we were fortunate to be able to receive a responsive bid from Virginia Transformer. While it notes some exceptions to our request for proposal that are there, those have been worked through with our staff and with Theka Engineering, and we've received a recommendation from Theka Engineering to move forward with the purchase from Virginia Transformer. They are one of the largest transformer manufacturers in the United States, and we're very comfortable with recommending them. We're also very excited about the fact that the delivery lead time for those is 36 to 38 weeks. And you can see the other two respondents that are there. That sounds like a lot, right? But we were seeing from the longest one there was Waukesha, SPX Waukesha, which you know, would have been almost 3 years, right? So that obviously doesn't fit with the needs of this development. So we're very glad that not only the lowest cost response bid was also one that was the shortest time frame for that. And so we are requesting the approval of a contract with Virginia Transformer in the amount of just over $3.4 million, with a 20% contingency in the amount of $680,000 for a total of just over $4 million pending approval of final form from the city attorney's office. And also because while we had been contemplating the East Point substation in the next year budget, due to the time frame and the commitment of funds, we're asking for a fiscal year 2022 capital budget amendment in the same amount in order to facilitate the purchase. And the contingency is really related primarily to the fact that and all the transformer bidders had this in there, but they have some escalations based upon the price of certain raw materials, including steel prices, that are going to be impacting or could potentially impact the price. Certainly, we think we're well within that level, but that number gets set 4 months ahead of the anticipated delivery of the transformer. So again, I don't think we have a whole lot of, given the total lead time of this delivery, we don't think we have a lot of exposure there, but there's some contingency that is based upon that. And also our staff was looking at whether or not there's some elements of the transformer that could be maybe improved off the base bid. So we're leaving a little contingency in there, and those are the reasons for that. And I'd be happy to answer any questions on this item.
Great, thank you, Dave. Questions from council? Yeah, Quincy.
What was that lead time again?
36 to 38 weeks.
So on average, most of the time, I was looking up a little bit ago, it ranges from 18 to 36. And that's pretty good given the climate we're in today, so.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
That's really
Again,
good.
when you looked at the other respondents and where they were at, and we were starting to hear those kind of longer lead items, even as we were developing the specifications. So we were a little bit nervous about, what would the time frame would be. So
Yeah.
we're very happy.
That's really good.
Other questions from council? I just have one, Dave, that budget amendment, that's a BPW budget amendment, not a city budget
That is
amendment?
correct, that's right. Yeah,
Okay.
that's right.
All right, just wanted to make
Unless-
sure that
unless
everybody
it-
was
it-
clear on that.
I'm comfortable either way. But if,
Since you mentioned it, I would recommend to council that we make that a BPW budget amendment.
Very good.
Yes, any other questions from council before I call the question? All right. What is the pleasure of council in regard to item 12A2, East Point Substation Transformer Purchase?
Move to approve that transfer purchase?
Moved by Vreeman. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Byrd. Any discussion? Seeing none. Kathy, would you please call the roll?
Peters. Yes. Corbin.
Yes.
Coronado.
Yes.
Arnshorst.
Yes.
Hoekstra.
Yes.
Raymond.
Yes.
Byrd.
Yes.
Vreeman.
Yes.
Mayor Box.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Great, thank you, Kathy. Item 12A3, East Point Substation Property Acquisition. Mr. Van Beek.
Yes, Mr. Mayor and Council, if you approved a project that's going to need a lot of electricity, and now you've approved a transformer, you need a place to put said transformer. So Dave is going to walk us through that recommendation.
Yeah, thank you.
Welcome, Dave.
Thank you. Hey, great to be with you this evening. So this is one of two properties that have been identified that together will make the space that's needed for the substation. The property in question is a portion of a parcel that is at 750 Waverly Court. Waverly Court is actually a road that comes off from Waverly and comes into the, as a cul-de-sac. Matter of fact, you can see it pretty clearly on the development agreement, again, with that water picture that's there. Comes into the north side of the LG property. That will be the location of the substation. We have about 0.7 acres of the property at 750 Waverly Court. The adjacent parcel is 752 Waverly Court. That property has been presented with an offer of just compensation based upon appraisal that we have done for that property, and is currently under consideration at this point. So we don't have that one for you, but fortunately, we do have the 0.7 acres, which is actually a portion of property that is owned by Koning Family LLC. It actually has a tenant on that property to the north a little bit. There's LS Mold is operating at that area, but this is vacant portion to the south end of that. And we have worked very carefully to try to just have the minimum need that we have within there in order to fit that. So with the price that we have, it's a $35,000 price for that with a $10,000 contingency. A $10,000 contingency here is really just because of the fact that we've on paper identified an area, but we've got to do a survey to determine the precise amount of acreage. Plus, we do have some inspections that have to be done, on that in terms of phase 1 and 2 environmental assessments and all that. So that covers some of that cost as well. So for a total of $45,000 pending those successful outcomes. And it is also is the closing is tie-barred to the closing on the other parcel as well. So we're not just buying the sliver without the other parcel. And here I'll again answer any questions you have.
Questions from council?
So what if this doesn't go through, or what if there's a problem getting the other parcel?
Well, so the process that we're using is one that, we, just as we have with a lot of properties for the power plant when it was built, we had to acquire, I think, about 60 different parcels of property there. The process that was used is where you submit an offer of just compensation, which technically starts an eminent domain sort of process. Now we like to avoid the actual following through all the way through that, and so those offers of just compensation, just like this one did, this buy-sell agreement, had a little bit of an incentive in there in order to try to get them to sign within the 30-day period of time. And so under that consideration now, we're really hopeful that they'll come back within this 30-day period of time and we'll be able to move forward under that. Should that not be successful, we can move forward under more of a request for possession. But we, again, really did not have to use that with any of the properties with Holland Energy Park, and I don't anticipate that that's going to be an issue here. But that would be what we would do if we needed to do that.
And you said there's a tenant on there now?
No, on the one that's for you tonight, there's actually, the parcel itself is big enough to where there's actually a tenant in the building, Ellis Mold to the north end of that, but then there's a lot of vacant land, and what we're looking at is a very narrow sliver, kind of near the south end of that would be adjacent to the full 2-acre size parcel that is actually has the offer of just compensation associated with it right now. That's under consideration.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I have one.
Yeah, go ahead, Belinda.
So I just, so when you say eminent domain, that means right now we're being nice, we're offering that regular market value, is that what?
Yeah, what we do is we do an appraisal. We try to find for the property owner the best we can by looking at whatever the highest and best use of that property is. And in a particular situation here with a vacant parcel, you're looking at usually comparable sales. And again, the appraisal that we had for those properties, you can see under the description of the report here is $50,000 an acre is the level. And so, that's that particular parcel that has the offer of just compensation is not for your consideration tonight, but the same appraisal, really was determining the value for both. But so we do that, we provide that, and then we also provide a small incentive. I think in this particular case, the incentive was somewhere in the area of a 10%, I believe, incentive that was associated with that. And so that's being considered if they turn around the return of that within a 30-day period of time. This particular property owner that's for you tonight was amenable to just a buy-sell agreement as opposed to an offer of just compensation. And not to say that the other one wouldn't be either. It's just a matter of that there's time clocks that start happening when you present the offer of just compensation, and we wanted to make sure that we continue to move along in a timely fashion with that.
Okay, thanks. So I'm not a real estate agent, but buy-sell means it's just gonna happen like lickety split fast?
Well, the closing, I think, after the
depending.
appraiser, after the assessments are done, we have like a 45-day period, I believe. I don't know if Vince is familiar with the contract, the buy-sell agreement, but it's that kind of time frame. But again, we're not going to close on this one until we have the other one
Okay.
ready to close, so that we don't just end up with a sliver without the other one there.
Okay, perfect, thanks.
Anyone else? All right, what is the pleasure of council in regard to item 12A3, East Point Substation property acquisition?
Move to approve the property acquisition as presented.
Moved by Vreeman, is there support?
Support.
Support by Coronado. Any discussion? Seeing none, Kathy, would you please call the roll?
Corbin? Coronado?
Yes.
Arnshorst?
Yes.
Hoekstra?
Yes.
Raymond?
Yes.
Byrd?
Yes.
Vreeman?
Yes.
Peters? Mayor Bucks?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Item 12A4, resolution to authorize issuance of water supply system revenue bonds, Series 2022A. Mr. Van Beek.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council. Here is another example. Dave referenced it earlier as to our service areas quite often in the utility are larger than the city boundaries. And as we know that we have an ongoing interest and support of regional collaboration and working together with our neighbors, here's just another one of those great examples where we work with our neighbors every single day in many, many different ways. And Dave's going to explain one of those right now.
Great, yeah, thank you. This is an item that we did review with you fairly recently when you took action to pass a resolution establishing a notice of intent to issue the financing associated with this project. And now tonight we're coming to you asking for your approval of a resolution that actually provides us the authority to issue the debt now that we're through that referendum period. Particularly, just to give, again, a highlight of the value of this project and what it's intended to do. As Keith mentioned, it's not just the City of Holland that we serve water to, but also we have a series of different retail and wholesale agreements with different jurisdictions. Specifically, serving retail, in addition to the City of Holland, we serve parts of Lake Township. We serve in Park Township now under a retail relationship with them that was changed from wholesale to retail with them fairly recently. We have a small portion of Holland Township on the east side of the city here in what is called the Federal District or the Federal School District that we serve in between Chicago Drive and 8th Street to Holland Township. And there's a very small portion, again, back to the 2010 agreement with the 425 agreement that brought property in for phase one of the what's now the LG plant. There's a small portion of Fillmore Township that receives some water service as well as part of that agreement. In a wholesale basis, we also serve the city of Zeeland, and because of that wholesale agreement, there's a little bit of service outside of Zeeland that they can provide. This is an important project because the lifeblood, the aorta of, I guess, if you look at the main artery of water supply coming out of the water plant. You like aorta? Was that good? All right, is that good? All right. It is much better than sludge cakes. That artery was built when the water plant was constructed back in 1957. So we're talking about greater than 60 years old at this point. And two reasons. One, reliability wise, we're getting to a point where if things would happen with that line, because it's such a critical element of our service, it could have, dramatic effect on our ability to serve at different parts of the year. And so there's some value in having some redundancy in that. In addition to that, some years ago, about close to 10 years ago now, we built an interconnect to the city of Wyoming. Not to the city itself, but to the city of Wyoming's water plant, which is actually up on New Holland Street north of Holland, along that and 168th. That connection, which actually goes down 160th Avenue, provides the ability for either plant to back each other up on an emergency basis. But long term, as our growth may continue to, in the Holland area, as our growth may continue, we might find ourselves in need of having more supply, not just from an emergency supply basis, but actually new supplies. Well, we have options there. We could either build onto our plant, we could build another plant somewhere, or more likely, because we have the connection to Wyoming and they have capacity in their plant, we could actually buy some capacity in their water supply. The trouble with that is if we were to try to take their water the same time we're pumping out from our plant, hydraulically, that's difficult. It becomes a problem. This line also solves that issue because not only does it provide redundancy, but it provides another artery to be able to bring the water in deeper into our service territory and also to connect it to where the line goes off to Zeeland. And because of that, we can actually operate in a way where neither of those lines are constrained. So it provides a redundancy standpoint and also a future growth opportunity for us from a hydraulic standpoint. And so all of those things are benefits. All of the retail customers, not just City of Holland, but then also the wholesale customers would participate in the funding of this project, in the fact that while we're issuing the bonds, the costs of this capital investment and the servicing of those bonds flows through not just the City of Holland retail customers, but all the others that are there, including the wholesale contracts that would do that. So what we're looking at tonight specifically to finance that is about an issuance of just over $17.2 million. And again, that notice of intent was approved through resolution back in January of this year. And so again, our board took action to a similar resolution to approve that. And so they're forwarding to you now this 7th supplemental revenue bond resolution authorizing Water System Revenue Bonds Series 2022A in the amount of $17.22 million to pay for the cost of the transmission improvement projects and the cost of issuance of that. And it will also authorize certain staff to be able to execute the sale and the signing of the necessary documents to close on those bonds when that time comes. And so with that, I think I can pause here, see if anybody has any questions on this particular project or the resolution.
Any questions from council? Nikki?
Yes, do any other municipalities have to approve this also, or is it just Holland?
No, that's a great question. Because it's a revenue bond and the BPW has the revenue authority and through the city council to set the rates, that's all that really has to happen is here. There are other cases where we have used either county general obligation bonds or other general obligation bonds. There we have a full faith and credit pledge from those different jurisdictions on various projects, but this is not such a bond issue. This is one that uses revenue bonds, so it does not require them to do that.
Good. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? All right, what is the pleasure of council in regard to item 12A4, resolution to authorize issuance of water supply system revenue bonds, Series 2022A?
Move to approve resolution to authorize issuance of water supply system revenue bond series 2022A.
Moved by Coronado. Is there support?
There is support.
Support by Byrd. Is there any discussion?
No, I just have to, in the little agreement, the agreement, it has the City of Holland City Council members' name, and we're all councilmen. Just saying, there are 3 council women.
To talk to the drafter of the resolution over here about that. That would be bond counsel. You're right. That would be bond counsel. That is not Cunningham Dahlman at all. Yeah, that's right.
It was just cute. I don't care, but I just.
Thank you for noting that. We'll
Right.
pass that along.
Any other discussion? Seeing none. Kathy, would you please call the roll?
Coronado,
Yes.
Arnsworth,
Yes.
Hoekstra,
Yes.
Raymond,
Yes.
Byrd,
Yes.
Vreeman,
Yes.
Peters, Corbin, Mayor Box.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you.
Next item, item 12C1, Broadband Ordinance Amendment for final adoption on March 2 of 2022. Mr. Van Beek.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council. As you noted in introducing this, this is a proposed ordinance amendment, which is a 2-step process. So this would be just first reading this evening and then a recommended final adoption on March 2. Now, what is this? You have in prior ordinance denoted that the BPW not only operates the broadband as a utility, but it outlines a business plan and kind of the history of that broadband. In Ron's outline, he talks about that the last time that this was changed and altered was when the broadband utility did specific provision of services in our downtown area. As you are all aware, it has been a priority of council to further take a look at that broadband utility, which really brings us to the point of needing to take a look at updating this ordinance to reflect not only the will of council, but also business plans that you've directed Mr. Coster and myself to work on. And we are working on those plans, and really this would need to be in place as we take a look at the possibility of expanding that broadband system to other residential areas throughout the city. So that is what this ordinance does. I know that Mr. Duckworth is prepared to answer other questions on this, but again, this is really just an update to an ordinance in a two-step process. And that's the matter that's before you this evening.
All right. Thank you. Any questions from council for staff or City Attorney Duckworth? Seeing, yeah, go ahead. Dave.
Taking a little bit of a risk here without getting too much into detail. In previous conversations, we talked about a certain area of unknownness, I guess, that had an effect on potential rates. I think it had something to do with, I can't think of it all, but it caused some concern about how much that we could charge in terms of our rate structure because of what other utilities, other communication utilities would have to deal with, and they might challenge us on a certain thing. Does this make sense to you at all? Ringing any bells?
Yeah, in this, you'll see, and the report notes it, and we allocate that. MCL 484.3114 is basically known as the Metro Act of the state. Yeah. And because we existed as a broadband utility before the date of that Metro Act, that Metro Act does not apply to us in this situation. So just to clarify and assert that as a date and fact, that's one thing that's being updated in this ordinance amendment also, that clearly states that we had the broadband utility up and operational prior to the date of the Metro Act.
Answers my question in spite of my poor description.
No problem at all. There's a lot of moving parts.
All right. Any other questions from council members? What is the pleasure of council in regard to item 12C1, broadband ordinance amendment?
Motion to support item 12C1.
Moved by Corbin. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Aaronsource. Any discussion? All those in favor say, or no, let's do a roll call on that one. How about that? Kathy, would you please call the roll?
Aaronshorst,
Yes.
Hoekstra,
Yes.
Raymond,
Yes.
Byrd,
Yes.
Freeman,
Agreed.
Peters, Corbin,
Yes.
Coronado,
Yes.
Mayor Box.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Great, thank you, Kathy. Next item on the agenda, 12E 4.1, Insurance Agent of Record Authorization. Mr. Van Beek.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. Momentarily, I'm going to ask Finance Director Lynn McCammon to come up here. Our insurance program is first based upon the need by state to have an agent that represents us and brings us through the process of going out to the market and then ultimately securing insurance. It was time that we went out and did an RFP and evaluated the agent that we wanted to have to do that work on our behalf and with us. And we went through that process here recently. And Lynn, why don't you come on up and describe that process and the results of that process and the recommendation this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and members of City Council. As Keith mentioned, an agent of record services is what we're looking at this evening. And our current provider of this service is Arthur J. Gallagher. And you may have recalled in the past couple years especially, we've had some challenging insurance markets to deal with. And the fact that they've been serving in that capacity since July of 2015, we just felt it was time and best practices to go through the request for qualifications process. So we did, and in fact, in November last year, we issued a request for qualifications, and we're happy to report we had a lot of interest, received some great proposals, and ultimately a team comprised of both the city and the Board of Public Works reviewed those proposals and narrowed it down to 2. So those 2 were actually Arthur J. Gallagher, who we currently use, and Marsh. And interestingly enough, the Board of Public Works uses Marsh for some. So we're kind of in a unique situation that we have firsthand experience with both of these providers. So how did these 2 compare? Both could do an excellent job, both great firms. Marsh is probably a little more experienced or has more clients in the utility segment, and Arthur J. Gallagher has a little bit more in the public sector. But again, we ultimately felt both could do a decent job. So what did our decision making come down to? Well, really it's service, right? Because the market, especially when it gets challenging like in the last couple years, we need this insurance agent of record to go out and sell our story. We've got a lot of great things going on in the city. But last year, our experience with our current provider, they came in with their proposal late, even though they know when the board wants to look at this. They've worked with us for that many years. So they came in late, and so that did not give us a time to even tell our story, have them go back to the marketplace and try to get us a better rate. So how does this work for Marsh? So for the Board of Public Works, they had an example where they have some very unique assets, right, with the energy park. So they sent an engineer out to get detailed specifications that they could go back to the carriers and explain what a great operation we have over at the board. And it resulted in a savings in the same market where we had an increase. So you can see why ultimately both the board and the city team felt that we would be better served at this time to recommend going with Marsh for both of the programs. So on a side note, they also reviewed this at the meeting last week at the Board of Public Works and voted unanimously to approve that recommendation as well. So either I or Dave could probably answer questions about either of these firms.
All right, great, thank you. Questions from council? Yeah, Nikki.
Yes, hi, Len. Thanks for the explanation. You tell a great story, too. What is the usual cycle for changing or asking for a request for proposals for an insurance company?
So we started back in November, and the reason we did is because that gave us time to review the proposals, and we had actually interviews with both of those firms. And really, we're already coming to the time where we want to get one in place because we have to notify all of our existing insurance carriers of our change. And we have to start the process because remember, we want them to come here, get our story so they can relay that back to the insurance market. So when you have a challenging market, it could make a difference, some of our great programs that we have.
So we choose one, and then when will you want to look at them again? And
So we have, we're recommending a 3-year contract with a potential extension at the end of that contract.
Okay. So 3 years about. Okay, thank you.
Yep. Belinda?
I was just going to ask Lynn, how late was Arthur Gallagher, and what was their reason or what? I mean, that.
Right, a good question. So yeah, so they know that we always look at it in June, and in fact, what happened last year, some of you may recall, is typically we like it to go to the Board of Public Works first, and then we come here. And it got so late that it actually, I think the Board of Public Works had to have a special meeting because it didn't get there in time for their regularly scheduled meeting. So it came in late June, and so it's a July 1st renewal. So we need time to evaluate. When it comes in mid to late June, that doesn't give us a lot of time to evaluate. And so we did express our displeasure with that process at the time, and they indicated they had some internal staffing changes on their part, but that doesn't matter. They're a big firm because somebody else should have stepped in even if they had those. So that's what we felt.
Okay. Keith?
Yeah, great questions, great discussion. And we do need to renew our insurance every year, as Lynn said. You know, this is a big time commitment and process that we committed to. So kind of going back to your question too, Nikki, I think it's really standard, and we really would not want to do this process anywhere close to every year. I think if we're having good process, that's why a 3 with a 3-year renewal, and sometimes even a 3-year renewal after that, is appropriate, because the amount of staff time, which means cost going into this, doing this often, is, when you take a look at all the services that we provide and consultants that we use in various areas, it's something that we don't want to overdo.
Mr. Vreeman?
Just a word of affirmation, Lynn. I appreciate your work on that, and affirm Keith and saying we don't need to do this every year. But thanks for taking the time to go through all the different RFPs and to save money and consistency along the way. So way to go.
Well, thank you, but I can't take the credit all. It was a team from the city and the Board of Public Works.
I have one question, just about the extension. So would that be another 3-year extension, or I think you said after our 3-year we would consider?
Yeah, I think it was a 2 or 3-year extension that they
3-year
had.
potential,
I think
yes.
it was 3 years.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Thank you.
Anyone else? What is the pleasure of council in regard to item 12E 4.1, Insurance Agent of Record Authorization?
To approve the authorization for finance.
All right, moved by Vreeman. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Coronado. Any discussion? Seeing none. Kathy, would you please call the roll?
Hoekstra,
Yes.
Raymond,
Yes.
Byrd,
Yes.
Vreeman,
Yes.
Peters, Corbin, Coronado,
Yes.
Arnshorst,
Yes.
Mayor Box.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Great, thank you. And thank you, Lynn. Appreciate it. Next item, 12E 6.1, gifts. Kathy, would you please review the gifts for us?
The city manager's office is pleased to report the following gifts: Parks and Recreation, Sal Perez Scholarship Program, cash receipts, reporting dates January 3 through January 30, 2022, $66. Department of Public Safety Services, Police Operations Victim Services Unit, Cunningham Dolman for Jean Day, $105. Department of Public Safety Services, K-9 Program, John and Lisa Yaros, a donation to K-9 expenses, including training, equipment, and service dogs, $400. It is recommended that these donations be accepted with appreciation, credited to the appropriate account, and an expression of gratitude be forwarded to said donors.
Great, thank you, Kathy. What is the pleasure of council in regard to the gifts?
Move to recommend said gifts with appreciation.
Moved by Coronado. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Arnshorst. Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Item number 13, communications from the city manager. Mr. Van Beek.
Yes, I do have just a few things tonight. First, I think maybe Ron and Vince, maybe if you guys have more Jean Days instead of Jean Day, that'd be awesome. But thank you for the participation in the gift to the Victim Services Unit. We might even let you wear jeans to Wednesday night meetings possibly. So, more seriously, another just great piece of news today, and much thanks again goes out to Lynn. So take this affirmation also, Lynn. You will recall that you authorized us to go out and go to market, if you would, for refunding of some bonds that we had recently, and we had that process finalized today. And I am very pleased to report to you that we had 7 bids, which through our financial advisor, PFM, they were very impressed about the action that we had on that, and that we ended up securing a bid through 2030 of 1.72%. That reflects a $210,000 savings, which is a $190,000 net present value savings, and I rounded some of those numbers off. But really fantastic, because when we first looked at that, the market has definitely not been going the correct direction as it would relate to trying to do some of these. So we were a little worried that we wouldn't meet what we had expected, and I'm pleased to say that this beats our projections and what we had in the documents in front of you. So we're very pleased with the outcome, and I thought it is always good to share good news and also pass on our thanks to Lynn and her team, and also our financial advisor group that did this work on our behalf. Finally, next week I will not be joining you for a study session. No applause. But you will have a joint session with the Planning Commission, which I think will be a great opportunity. I'm not going to preview it too much because we have gone through a multi-year process to become what the state would designate as a redevelopment-ready community. And the opportunities in multiple ways of being recognized for that process, but also grant opportunities that come and are available to us because we get that designation. So you'll have a series of presentations about that and other things jointly with the Planning Commission. And then Matt Van Dyken is going to lead you through some information on communications and website and different things that we do to communicate with the public. And I know that we had talked a few times that would be something that you would be interested in seeing firsthand. So Matt will do a great job of leading you through that next week. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Keith. There's nothing from the mayor this evening. Next item is item number 15, appointments, motions, and communications from council members. I'm going to do this a little differently. We have one item that's on the agenda, item number A, notice of proposed amendments to the rules of council, and we discussed those at last week's study session, and we asked our wonderful staff to kind of reduce our conversations to writing. And so I'm going to throw it to you, Mr. Van Beek, if you would kind of go through quickly what those proposed amendments are for us.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council. And Cinca and I coordinated on this. I hope that we captured your direction from the last meeting, but we made the following changes. Public comment during study sessions would be moved from 3 to 5 minutes. Under the section that we are in right now, it will state that any member of council shall have the opportunity to present motions and formal suggestions, and we added the word information or recommendations for discussion by council. We updated some admittedly kind of dated language that previously read, shall the main be now put? And we changed that to, shall we call the question? And Mayor referenced earlier rights of the participating audience, that instead of asking those that are making public comment name their residential address, that we ask them to just mention the municipality in which they live. And then just one other section where we just also clarified the 5 minutes per agenda item in study sessions. And again, this is an ordinance change, actually, the way we go through this. So this would be first reading this evening, and considering your approval to move forward, then this would go for final reading on March 2.
Great. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Any comments from council members in regard to the proposed amendments to the rules of council? What is the pleasure of council in regard to the first reading on the notice of proposed amendments to the rules of council?
Move to accept.
Moved by Coronado. Is there support? Support by Vreeman. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Any other motions, communications from council members this evening?
Are you?
Belinda?
I just wanted to say, being Black History Month, that I was very surprised and nicely surprised that one of my constituents, Larry Brothers, I'm on 17th, so he must be on 19th. And yeah, they featured a story on him, WZZM, and he is starting his own business. Unfortunately, it's in Grand Rapids, and it's called Nadine's, but fish fries. So I'm all about fish fries, especially with the Lent coming up and all that good stuff. So trying to eat more vegetarian or fish. So anyways, I thought that was nice reflection of a Holland resident. So thank you.
Great, thank you. Quincy?
I'm going to speak a little bit to Nadine's as well. But I want to just share my thoughts on Holland. I think Holland's a great place. Love Holland. Some of you know my story. Went from being homeless, and there were a lot of people in this community that supported me. And then I ran across this article a little while ago I wanted to share earlier, and I thought today would be a good day to do it as well. And kind of goes hand in hand with what you were saying about Nadine's and it being Black History Month. So I wanted to talk about Nadine's a little bit, but I wanted to give a backstory as well. This article talks about Dobe's Pizza, which is, if you haven't been there, is exceptional. The first day they opened, they were only open for 2 hours. They were only open for 2 hours because so many people supported them. And they ran out of dough, which was 250 pounds of dough. So that's a lot of pizzas. And the article goes on to say, after an entire weekend of restocking, the pizzeria reopened the following Tuesday with shortened hours and pre-ordering. So I'll tell you this, when we went, they opened at 4 o'clock. We got there at 4:03. And there were people walking out of the pizzeria with pizzas. So order by phone and order early. So great was Holland's thirst to support a new local business that owners, Ali and Chris Dobler, had to alter their business plans to keep up with the demand. Part of that is because Dobe's is everything it promised to be: thick, soft dough, sweet sauce, topping that packs a punch. But it's also because of Holland remains one of the best places to open a small business, even as a mom and pop shop continue to struggle throughout COVID. I've been a business reporter for 4 years. Now I speak from experience when I say businesses tend to close during the first quarter. Once the holiday season ends, business owners take a step back, decide whether they can weather another year. We certainly saw it last year, but for whatever reason, 2022 thus far has been an anomaly. I'm covering more openings and reopenings than ever before. Business owners aren't shying away from Holland. Big E's working to reopen, Goog's Pub and Grand King's Buffet are working on new mixed-use developments. Bauerman's Blueberries, which is really good, by the way, is on 8th Street. Rumor has it that Holland is getting a crumble cookie soon, plus a Dickey's barbecue pit, and that's just restaurants. What about new retails? Nearly every time I've asked small business owners in Holland how their first year in business has been, they say the same thing. The community has been so supportive. They say it with an air of surprise, as though they expected support, but not nearly as much as they get. And she goes on to say, when she first moved to Holland, she was surprised at the support too, and not just from customers, but among business owners, people who were supposed to be competitors. I'm not anymore. Holland is a place where businesses thrive and people care. And now we've proved that we can continue to thrive no matter what happens in the world around us. The people in Holland are always willing to pay a little more to get fresh, local product that feels better. Those dollars circulate back into our community when business owners shop for supplies, visit the grocery stores, and put their children in our schools. It's what makes this town unique. That's why my husband and I went to Van Weeren Hardware instead of Lowe's when we remodeled our house. And she goes on to just talk a little bit more about Holland. And that's what makes Holland so unique. And it's the caring, it's the going the extra mile. We talked about this a little bit, I brought it up about the partnerships that we have in Holland with the private sector and the city collaborations. And there's so many people, the lineage goes back with so many people who give of their time, their efforts, their resources, their finances. We have every public meeting, we read off gifts. And I've been on council for 6 years, and there's been one time where we didn't have gifts. That's saying a lot, where people are giving money and then time. Two big commodities. And it's just amazing that we live in this community, and I don't want people to overlook. I know we've had conversations about mission statement and vision statement and all that, but this is a community of action. We can talk and talk and talk, but if we don't have action behind those things, it's for nothing. And I think actions speak so much louder than words ever will or could. And again, that leads me to Black History Month, to Nadine's. This is a fish and chip and wings place, which I love wings. And Councilmember Coronado brought it up. I don't think they're in Grand Rapids. I want to say they're in off of Washington, next to, there's B2 store, T-Mobile, and I don't remember what else. Go ahead.
It's the stretch. It's the strip mall just north of Family Fair, I believe,
Yes.
is where it's in. I haven't been there yet, but I'm gonna.
Yeah,
Yes.
I haven't been there either, but I thought, I heard Grand Rapids, and I was
Nope,
surprised.
it's here in
Okay.
Holland. So,
If it worked, my ad.
is that
Well, he
before?
lives
Is that
in the
before
third
the
ward.
last?
Just for the record, he does live in the third ward. I got that much straight.
So, go out and support him. Shut him down. Make him run out of food. Just
Yes.
surprise him and
That's true.
let him know that this community is behind him.
Yes.
And don't let it just be for Black History Month. I think it's pretty awesome that we have a black entrepreneur in our community who's starting a business during Black History Month. That's awesome. And it's in Holland. You know, I moved to Holland 25 years ago, and I would see a black person in Holland probably every 3 months, every 3 to 4 months, and that would be it. And now it's so different. Every time I go out, I see a black person in Holland, and I love it. I love the diversity. Again, it's actions, not just words. And, you know, some people may disagree with me, but I don't care. I'm really happy with seeing the things that we have in this community. I didn't like that. You put me on TV. Thanks, Matt.
If I may add, Dobes has a special $5.50 pizza and a soda and 2 garlic pieces of bread. So I've been told.
So yes, support local, and Holland's a great city. That's it.
Yes.
And Quincy, just for the record, Nadine's is at 1111 South Washington Avenue. Yeah, it's very easy to remember, 1111. Yeah. Any other communications from council? Seeing none, there's just one more motion that I would entertain this evening.
Move to close our meeting.
Moved to adjourn by Vreeman. Is there
Or that word,
support?
that's fine.
Support by Peters. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.